everyone, welcome back to Onyx Pages. I'm Imagery with a 7-calorie shell of Tentacle by Rita Indiana. So I read Tentacle in, I think it was for the Latinx-a-thon, and I was really attracted to, well, first of all, let's take a moment for the cover. I was attracted to this because my understanding reading this, or at least reading the blurb of it, was that it would have non-binary rep, trans rep, that it was a fantastical story taking place in Latin America with black characters, central black characters, and I was really excited. So there's not gonna be a cliffhanger. I loved this book and I hated this book. And it's hard to do reviews like this because I would love to just gush about it, but I had a hard time with this book, and it hurt my heart in some ways because I'm seeing a trend in some of the books that I've read, some of the magical realism books that I've read for adults coming out of the Latinx community. So I want to be careful about some of the things that I'm going to say in this video, but I do have to talk about something that I've noticed. So let me just start with what Tentacle is about. Plucked from her life on the streets of post-apocalyptic Santo Domingo, young maid Asilde Figueroa finds herself at the heart of a Santeria prophecy. Only she can travel back in time and save the ocean and humanity from disaster. But first, she must become the man she always was, with the help of a sacred anemone. Tentacle is an electric novel with a big appetite and a brave vision, plunging headfirst into questions of climate change, technology, Yoruba ritual, queer politics, poverty, sex, colonialism, and contemporary art. Bursting with punk energy and lyricism, it's a restless, addictive trip. The Tempest meets the telenovela. So obviously you can understand why when I saw this and read this, I was like, this is my book. And I even used my Bookie Charm bookmark when I read it. So first of all, this is not Own Voices. So I don't believe that Rita Indiana is a black person. I'm not sure, but I don't think that they identify themselves as black. But let me just tell you, so okay. My issue with some of the stories that I've read, now I don't read a lot of Latinx writers and I'm not an expert and I really shouldn't be generalizing. So I apologize for that. At the same time, I read because I want to read stories where black folks are like loved, right? And so last year I read, I think it was called, I DNF'd it. I think it was called The War of the Saints or The War of the Gods. Anyway, I'll put a picture of the book up like right there. And in the first couple of chapters, like the N word was used with a hard R. And the main character, it was a young girl, and her family really hated black people. And so as I was reading it, I just felt assaulted by the N word over and over and over again. And I loved the idea of the story, because it was supposed to be, and probably is, a good story about an Orisha who has come to life when a statue of her is brought to Brazil, I think. And I was like, I want to read about a black goddess coming to life, but I just couldn't get past all the anti-blackness. I couldn't get past the shadeism. I couldn't get past the unnecessary and relentless use of the N word with a hard R. I'm like, why do we need that? It's 2019. Why? And the same thing happened in this book where, you know, there was like imagery of a dark-skinned black man getting hung in the forest. There was the N word with a hard R. In the first chapter, is it even on the first page? Yeah, okay. Listen to this, okay? Recognizing the virus in the black man, the security mechanism in the tower releases a lethal gas and simultaneously informs the neighbors, who will now avoid the building's entrance until the automatic collectors patrolling the streets and avenues pick up the body and disintegrate it. A sealed waits until the man stops moving to disconnect and return to cleaning the window panes encrusted on a daily basis with sticky soot. As she smears the windows with Windex, she sees a collector across the street hunt down another illegal, a woman who tries to hide behind a dumpster unsuccessfully. The machine picks her up with its mechanized arm and deposits her in its main container with all the diligence of a gluttonous child picking up dirty candy from the floor. Okay? So we already have like dark-skinned Haitians being like literally picked up on the street by machines and destroyed. Page 1, first page of the story. Okay, and I'm just like, I don't want to read this. I don't want to read it. I read it, the whole book, but I needed to know whether there was some kind of redemption coming at the end for these black characters, and I don't think that there were. And I'm tired of reading books with disposable black bodies, killable black bodies. I'm done. So, I mean, this book was hard for me because of that. You know, there were a lot of really interesting things about it, but I just felt like I'm just tired of it. Lots of great writers are able to write stories where it gets at, you know, the violence experienced by dark-skinned black people without perpetuating that violence in the narrative itself. Like, it's not necessary, it's not cute. No. Okay, but in Jerry, if you didn't like it, why did you read it, you ask? Okay, very good question. I read it because this story itself, if you could put aside the other stuff, which I couldn't, but I had to read it. I had to read the story while dealing with the violence of the story at the same time. And that's a whole other video. But this story actually also did a lot of other things. Like, this story answered, like, it gave us a vision of the future, right? And I guess, to be fair, if you think about the violence that's happening in our communities all around the world, and if you just continue that on a straight track without any interruption, we will end up in a world like this, right? Like, we already end up in a world like this where, you know, children are kept in cages in the US. We already live in a world where indigenous people don't have access to water. The water that comes out of their taps is like yellow and black, and it's not drinkable, and people are dying of thirst in first world countries. We already live in a world where if you are queer and your community finds out, you can be shot by people on the street, or the government can sanction your death because homosexuality is punishable by death, right? So, like, we're already here in 2019. We are in this dystopia. I get it, right? And so maybe I shouldn't be mad at a book that just shows us our own face. Maybe that's my issue. But there were things about this that I thought were really interesting. So one of the things that I thought that was really interesting about Tentacle is that it tells the story of this, like, from the perspective of this little sea creature. This sea creature is a portal to the realm of the gods, and it's part of a prophecy. And the person who engages with this sea creature, who answers the prophecy, is a transgender person of color. And there's an exchange that happens. There's a change to their gender, which happens really quickly. And also there's this splitting off of this person. So you've got this otherworldly element in this story where characters can simultaneously be in two different time periods at once. Okay, so just think about it. Think about being where you are right now and also having a part of you that at the same time is in another world in another time. Not like time travel where you're hopping into another dimension, but you're simultaneously in two places living at the same time. And what happens to you in one place impacts you in the other place, right? Like at the same time. So that was fascinating because I hadn't really seen that. And there was like, it was gritty. There was a lot of art in it, as the blurb said. So you get to sort of be with these characters while they're in this house, all producing art in the 70s and 80s. Like just some really interesting stories. It was hard to understand in some places, which I think is why my review is a little bit choppy. I don't even think that, I should do a 7 calorie review. Okay. So in terms of world building, I would give a full calorie shell for world building because it was, while the world was chaotic, it was also very interesting. And I love any stories that take us into the world of the Orisha, and I can learn more about that world, and there's some undersea activity here, so I really, really like that. So that was one. In terms of the characters, there's a lot of diversity, and we do see the story through the eyes of a trans character, and that was also really cool. Trans character of color, also really interesting, and it took up questions of poverty, lack of resources, what it means to want to transition but not to have the resources to do so, and what that means. So definitely the most marginalized person was the point of view that we heard the story from, although the points of views definitely shifted throughout. The third cowrie shell is about point of view, so I would give a full cowrie shell for point of view. In terms of the fourth cowrie shell, which I have my notes behind me. No, in front of me. So the fourth cowrie shell is relevance, the conflict, themes, and problems in the story. And that's where I would say this story didn't deal enough with anti-Black racism, and it didn't deal enough with the violence that's visited against Black bodies, and in fact, it perpetuated it. So it was 0 for that, a negative cowrie for that. For options, without spoiling it, at the end of the story, there's a really important choice that needs to be made by the main character. And the choice that was made surprised me. So at the end of the story, I think I threw the book. I was like, why did you do that? So it was a shocking ending. But I appreciated it. So I would give half a cowrie shell for options. For otherworldly elements, was the magic world interesting? Was it engaging? Did I like it? I would give a full cowrie shell for that because of the double dimension thing that I was talking about. And also, even though the gods were present, they were also not there. So I loved that as well. And in terms of the overall reading experience, I would give like a quarter of a cowrie shell for that because while I enjoyed reading it, I also found myself hurt by the portrayals of Black folks and the violence experienced by Black folks in the story. So yeah, that is my review of... I've filmed a couple of videos here. I'm in my family's home, and it's just, I just feel like I'm rambling. I hope this made sense and that you enjoyed it. If you've read Tentacle, I would love to know, I dropped it on the floor. I would love to know what you thought of it. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but I took, can you see? Okay, I took a lot of notes in the book. There's a lot of WTFs and notes and underlines and all that kind of stuff because I really wanted to engage with it, and I did. And I noticed that there are Oh, I thought there were footnotes. Just, it was wild. This was wild. This is wild. Let me look through some of my notes. I said great establishing paragraph, but there's so much violence against black bodies. Technology was really, really interesting. There are triggers for sexual violence in here, all over the place. Yeah, it's very violent as well. Triggers for addiction. There's a lot of drugs in here. There's a lot of anti-queer violence. There's fat phobia. Like, just, the way that the black characters were portrayed, like, just then a huge guy, black as coal, came into the studio. That's all you have for him. Anyway, oh, there's a lot of sex. Yeah, it's just, as I said, I loved this book and I hated this book. So that's all I got for you. I hope that you enjoyed this. Maybe I won't even post it. We'll see. But thanks very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.